Hey guys, tonight we're diving into one of the strangest, goofiest, somehow still dangerously closed to war stories in history. A tale where a pig, yes, a pig, almost set two powerful nations on the brink of armed conflict. Imagine standing on a windswept island in the Pacific Northwest, rain soaking your coat, the air thick with fog, and you're watching two armies glare at each other across muddy fields. All because one farmer's pig decided to have a snack. You probably won't survive this if you think war is always about blood and steel. Sometimes it's about livestock and pride. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments so I can say hi from wherever you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge down a gravel path on San Juan Island, the ground damp with sea mist. There's the salty tang of the ocean mixed with the faint, musky scent of pigs rooting through vegetable patches nearby. Across a wooden fence, a dozen settlers scowl at one another, their boots sinking slightly into the mud. Soldiers lounge in the distance, muskets resting against stacked crates. The entire scene seems more like a sleepy town fair after dark than the prelude to international disaster. But this is where it all began. Back in 1859, the border between British-controlled Vancouver Island and the U.S. Oregon Territory was a mess of half-drawn lines and ambiguous treaties. The Hudson's Bay Company ran British interests in the region, while American settlers, hungry for land and opportunity, had quietly pushed in, fencing and farming wherever they pleased. San Juan Island, sitting between Vancouver and Washington, became a perfect slice of disputed wilderness. No one knew or wanted to agree on who owned it. Enter the pig. The pig belonged to a British employee of the Hudson's Bay Company named Charles Griffin, a burly, bristled fellow with a habit of letting his livestock roam free in search of cabbage, carrots, and whatever else happened to be growing. One afternoon, Griffin's prized porker wandered through a gap in the fence and into the garden of an American settler named Lyman Cutlar. Cutlar had spent days preparing his vegetables, coaxing spinach and beans from the soggy earth. Then along came the pig, snout deep in his carefully tended patch, stomping, eating, and leaving a wake of destruction in its path. When Cutlar spotted the intruder, his temper flared faster than a campfire in dry wood. He grabbed his rifle because why not and shot the pig dead. One bullet, one pig. The entire world nearly lost its mind. Cutlar later explained that he didn't mean to escalate things, that he simply protected his crop. But British settlers, outraged at what they considered an insult, and perhaps fearing precedent, demanded compensation. Griffin insisted his pig had every right to graze freely, as pigs are wont to do. Cutlar retorted that pigs have no respect for private property, unlike, say, your neighbor's noisy children. As you stand there, taking in the scene, it's hard not to laugh. But remember, this wasn't some backyard spat. The islands were contested territory, and both London and Washington were already on edge over boundaries, trade, and influence. The pig's death was like tossing a match into a powder keg lined with treaties, pride, and poorly drawn maps. Historians still argue whether the pig's trespass was accidental, malicious, or simply inevitable given the animal's nature. Some even suggest Griffin deliberately let the pig roam, daring the Americans to react. But no one can deny that this porcine incident lit the fuse of a diplomatic crisis that could have gone spectacularly sideways. For now, you linger at the fence, watching as both sides argue about compensation, property rights, and honor. A few bystanders chuckle at the absurdity, while others glare as if ready to charge across the field. Somewhere in the background, a soldier absent-mindedly polishes his rifle, as though expecting trouble but secretly hoping none comes. This, then, is how it began. not with battle lines or war drums, but with a pig's snout and a farmer's rage. From this muddy little patch, the stage was set for something far larger. And trust me, you'll want to stick around to see just how far this all goes. You're still standing by that rickety fence, eyes fixed on the garden where the pig's footprints, dark and squishy, mar the orderly rows of vegetables. The air is cool, damp, and smells faintly of cabbage leaves and wet earth. A few neighbors hover nearby, arms crossed, waiting for someone, anyone, to break the tension. It feels as though the entire island is holding its breath, like a crowd watching a toddler about to throw the first tantrum. And in this moment, all because a pig couldn't resist a snack. After the shooting, tempers flare on both sides, but oddly, no one immediately draws steel to settle the dispute. Instead, the settlers erect fences, sturdy wooden barriers hastily built to prevent livestock from wandering across property lines. It's a practical solution, but also a symbolic one. Suddenly, land isn't shared, it's defended. The Americans reinforce their side with rough-hewn posts and wire, while the British erect their own barriers, equally awkward and equally tense. You trail along the fence line, running your fingers over splintered wood damp from the sea mist. It's not high enough to stop determined animals, or perhaps determined settlers, but it's enough to say, this far, no farther. As the evening draws in, lanterns flicker in windows, and conversations erupt in hushed tones near cookfires. Some settlers speak of the pig as if it were a demon sent by foreign powers. Others simply shrug, muttering that pigs are pigs and trouble always finds a way. It's funny how quickly neighbors become rivals when pride and property are at stake. Cutlar insists compensation is owed. Griffin demands an apology. Others weigh in, urging restraint or daring escalation. You overhear one man joking that perhaps the pig had more rights than the settlers after all. He was, after all, born British, free to roam wherever he pleased. The local gossip spreads like wildfire. Within hours, the story of the dead pig travels beyond the island. Letters are sent to officials on both sides. The Hudson's Bay Company dispatches messengers to Vancouver Island, while American settlers complain to Washington. Suddenly, this small rural mishap has national implications. By the next morning, fences are reinforced with barrels, crates, and anything else at hand. Some settlers fashion makeshift watch posts, while others sharpen pitchforks, though, truth be told, most of the men are half-hearted about confrontation. You pass a cluster of soldiers drilling lazily near a barn, muskets slung over their shoulders, more worried about rain seeping into their powder horns than about battle. Historians still argue whether the fences were genuinely defensive or meant to provoke. Some believe the settlers wanted a reason to challenge British claims, while others insist the barriers were a natural response to property disputes. Whatever the case, they mark the beginning of a slow-burning conflict fueled by wounded pride, unclear maps, and a stubborn sense of ownership. By afternoon, tempers simmer but haven't boiled over. People bring baskets of produce to share, neighbors exchange awkward smiles, and children, blissfully unaware of looming tension, chase each other along the fence's base. The pig's ghost, so to speak, lingers in every conversation. As night falls, you sit by a small fire with a few locals, the flames crackling softly. Someone retells the story, embellishing the pig's appetite, its swagger, its fearless intrusion into enemy fields. Laughter bubbles up, but it's nervous laughter. Everyone knows this isn't a simple trespass anymore. It's the opening move in a larger drama none of them wanted, but few dare to stop. You wrap your coat tighter against the chill, watching the fire's glow flicker over the faces of men whose tempers are quick but whose resolve is shaky. Tomorrow, they'll wake to the same damp earth, the same fences, and the same unresolved questions. And you, standing at the edge of this absurd crisis, can't help but wonder how something so small, a pig's greedy snack, could push two empires closer to war. You rise early, the faint gray of dawn spilling over the wet landscape like a soft blanket, and the sound of gulls crying overhead feels both ordinary and ominous. The fog clings to the fields, curling around fences and shrouding barns, while smoke from small breakfast fires drifts lazily toward the sky. San Juan Island stirs, but unease lingers like the sea mist, thick, pervasive, and impossible to ignore. As you wander along the path toward the cluster of homes and sheds where the settlers live, you notice how close everyone's lives are here. A British farmhand's hut sits barely 50 feet from an American's chicken coop. The stables, the garden plots, and the grain stores are all crammed together, separated by improvised fences and mutual suspicion rather than geography. Children dart between fences without thinking, their laughter spilling over like spilled milk, while adults shoot sideways glances, careful not to provoke. The settlers themselves are a motley bunch. Some arrived with families, hopeful to carve out a life from the rugged land. Others are single men, rough around the edges, trading, fishing, and farming in equal measure. A few British officers from the Hudson's Bay Company pace with stiff authority, their polished boots out of place among the muddy boots of American farmers. Soldiers from both nations, though officially not at war, maintain outposts along the roads, rifles slung and eyes scanning the misty horizon. You pass a group of women huddled by a well, hushed but clearly intrigued by the escalating dispute. One whispers, "Will they fight?" Another scoffs, "Over a pig?" A third, older woman shakes her head. "It's not the pig, it's pride." You tuck that away mentally. She's onto something. Beneath the absurdity lies something more primal, fear of humiliation, a desire to assert rights, the dread of being seen as weak. In the small marketplace that sprung up near the settlers' compound, tradespeople hawk their wares. Fish wrapped in seaweed, hand-woven baskets, wooden tools polished from long use. Here, commerce continues, but it's tinged with uncertainty. A British trader argues about price with an American farmer, only to pause, glance around, and drop his voice as if listening for trouble. Even the dogs seem uneasy, noses twitching, ears perked. You catch snippets of conversation as you pass. They're calling for reinforcements. They say Washington will send more troops. Vancouver's governor's sending ships. One man adds with a half smile, or maybe they'll send a pig with a medal. It's easy to laugh, but you sense that beneath the humor lies tension stretching taut like a rope over a fire. Some settlers, desperate for distraction, organize a weekend fishing trip, claiming they need to keep morale up. Others trade wild stories about British cunning, American stubbornness, or mysterious alliances that may or may not exist. One neighbor boasts that the Americans will show them what real men can do, while another counters that the British will crush them before breakfast. And yet, despite all this posturing, most people here seem uncertain. They sharpen tools but rarely strike. They boast but avoid eye contact. They gather in crowds but leave at the first sign of trouble. You realize that the island's residents are caught between bravado and caution, with neither side eager to pull the trigger. Historians still argue whether the settlers were genuinely fearful of invasion or simply reacting to rumors amplified by boredom and isolation. Some insist that the daily grind of frontier life bred resilience rather than paranoia. Others believe that, in a place where law is murky and oversight scarce, even a pig's trespass becomes a test of allegiance and nerve. As you climb a ridge overlooking the clustered dwellings, you pause to take it all in. Smoke spirals upward from dozens of chimneys. Children's laughter mingles with the occasional bark of a dog. Soldiers stroll about lazily, rifles slung casually over shoulders, while a pair of British and American officers exchange stiff nods without quite shaking hands. Life goes on, but on a knife's edge. You can't help but smile at the absurdity. This island, with its foggy mornings and cramped homes, feels like a stage set for something grand and terrifying, yet oddly mundane. Here, history could be made or avoided, all because of a hungry pig and a farmer's temper. You shake your head, half amused, half awed by how quickly routine life can tip toward chaos. And deep down, you know that the next few days will reveal whether this standoff will fizzle like morning mist or spiral into something much darker. The morning air is sharper now, colder as the sun struggles to break through the gray sky. You stand beside Lyman Cutler's garden, the wreckage of the pig's feast still evident in the trampled leaves and chewed stalks. Damp earth clings to your boots as you step gingerly over a fallen cabbage. The smell of crushed greenery is thick and almost sweet, mingled with the faint metallic tang of blood where the pig fell. You bend, brushing your fingers through the mud, and it's easy to imagine the pig's snout pushing deep into the soil, rooting for another bite. Cutler stands nearby, jaw tight, eyes bloodshot from restless nights. He watches the patch of destroyed crops like it's a battlefield, and, perhaps in his mind, it is. Around him, neighbors gather, murmuring, some angry, others incredulous. The pig's death has become a rallying point. One settler, a wiry man with a shotgun, whispers to another, "This is war, whether we like it or not." Another mutters, "All for a pig." It happens in the quietest way possible. One sharp crack that slices through the morning fog. Cutler's rifle discharges, echoing off the hills like a dull drumbeat. The pig's body jerks, lifeless, slumping into the mud with a sickening finality. For a moment, there's silence. The settlers freeze, mouths parted, as if the shot itself has stunned them into disbelief. Then the reactions ripple outward like concentric waves. A woman gasps, covering her mouth with both hands. A boy starts crying. A soldier halfway down the road pauses mid-step, eyes wide. Even the crows circling overhead seem to freeze before flapping off toward the cliffs. Cutler lowers the rifle slowly, his face pale but resolute. "It wouldn't stop," he says in a low voice, almost ashamed. "It was eating everything." Griffin, the pig's owner, bursts from his house, cheeks flushed, eyes blazing with fury. "My pig!" he roars, brandishing a cane as if it could reverse the moment. "My pig! That animal was my livelihood." His neighbors grab him, trying to calm him, but he thrashes and demands compensation, an apology, perhaps revenge. You step back, heart racing. The absurdity is glaring, and yet you feel the tension tightening around you. The shot isn't just about a pig anymore. It's about what comes next. Within hours, messengers are dispatched. Telegraph wires hum with news sent to Vancouver Island and to Washington. Both governments, startled, react swiftly. Orders are drafted. Troops are mobilized. Cannons and muskets are prepared. Warships are readied for the uncertain waters between British and American territories. Men who barely know how to hold a rifle are suddenly expected to defend a border drawn with more guesswork than certainty. Yet, even amid the seriousness, humor creeps in. At a nearby tea gathering, a clerk jokes, "If the British want battle, let them face pigs instead. At least they'll know what's coming." Another replies, "A pig's revenge is more certain than Parliament's support." It's tempting to laugh, but everyone senses that the joke masks anxiety. For beneath the surface, pride gnaws at both sides. British settlers are insulted and fearful their authority will be undermined. American pioneers fear being bullied out of land they worked hard to cultivate. A dead pig is merely the spark. Old resentments, unclear claims, and wounded egos are the real fuel. Historians still argue whether Cutler's shot was deliberate or a moment of frustration gone too far. Some accounts paint him as a heroic defender of his farmstead. Others insist it was reckless, impulsive, and destined to inflame tensions. Whatever the truth, the shot became a symbol, proof that a trivial dispute could spiral when left unchecked. You glance around at the gathered crowd, noticing how many eyes now dart toward the sea, as if waiting for the next disaster to wash ashore. It's almost surreal. The world's greatest powers are on the brink of war, and it's all because a pig refused to respect property lines. As you walk away from the scene, your stomach tightens with a mix of dread and amusement. Somewhere in the distance, a soldier sharpens his sword with a distracted air, while another scribbles notes for a report no one will want to file. Meanwhile, in homes across the island, women pack supplies, children ask questions, and men stare at maps that no one agrees on. This is how wars start, you think. Not always with bombs and bloodshed, but with wounded pride, bad timing, and something as ridiculous as a pig's appetite. The day after the shot, the island feels different, as if the air itself holds its breath, waiting for something to happen. You step outside and the ground is churned by wagon wheels and boot prints, a muddy chaos spreading from one settlement to the next. The scent of wet earth, horse sweat, and gunpowder lingers, barely masked by the smoky aroma of breakfast fires. There's a low hum of activity everywhere, but beneath it you can sense the nerves, like the taut strings of a violin about to snap. By midday, reinforcements begin to arrive. From the British side, soldiers in scarlet coats march stiffly across the hills, muskets glinting in the pale sun. Their leader, a colonel with a waxed mustache, barks orders at men and used to frontier dampness. From the American side, sailors disembark from steamships, lugging rifles and barrels, faces drawn from sleepless nights spent staring into fog-bound waters. Officers in blue uniforms try to look composed, though the clatter of crates and awkward fumbling betray their unease. You wander between the camps, ducking behind barrels and trees, listening to the odd choreography of preparation. Soldiers drill, but half-heartedly. They practice loading muskets, then forget to aim. Others lounge on crates, polishing weapons with absent minds, or debate over how many bullets they should actually carry. One private snickers. If this is war, it's going to be a long nap before anything happens. The higher-ups, meanwhile, fuss over logistics. A British adjutant argues with a supply officer about rations. An American captain consults his map 3 times, only to shrug and say, "I'll just follow orders anyway." Officers on both sides pretend to review battle plans in earnest, though their conversations drift toward gossip, food, and speculation about what the other side might or might not do. You pass a group of soldiers lounging near a campfire. One, trying to look fierce, boasts, "We'll crush them before sundown." His companion snorts quietly, "Unless we trip over our own feet." Laughter bubbles, quickly stifled when an officer approaches. Even the artillery units seem more ornamental than practical. Cannons sit on wooden frames near the shoreline, wheels half buried in mud, ropes coiled like sleeping snakes. Powder kegs are stacked carefully, but guarded by men too weary to bother checking twice. Naval vessels offshore, looming dark against the mist, seem ready to blast, but nobody really expects them to. The absurdity doesn't stop with soldiers. Local settlers rush to volunteer, only to be told their help isn't needed. "Go home," one officer snaps, embarrassed by their enthusiasm. A group of curious children trails after a soldier, asking if they'll get to fire a cannon. He grins sheepishly and says, "Maybe if you learn to carry this musket first." Throughout the afternoon, supplies arrive from mainland ports. Barrels of food, crates of ammunition, and tents meant for larger encampments. Yet much of it goes unused. The men are too uncertain, the commanders too cautious, and the orders too vague. It's like watching an elaborate play rehearsed with zero expectation that it will ever be performed. Historians still argue whether this buildup was pure theater designed to avoid confrontation or simply the result of bureaucratic inertia. Some scholars suggest that both governments wanted to demonstrate readiness without risking actual combat, a show of force calculated to intimidate rather than engage. Others believe indecision, compounded by foggy communications and inexperience, led to the farce. In one corner of the camp, you overhear a conversation between officers from opposing sides. They speak in clipped phrases, each testing the other's resolve. One says, "We stand ready to defend our claim." The other replies, "As do we." Neither wants to say, "We'd rather not fight." The tension is palpable but also strangely playful, as if both sides are daring the other to push first, while hoping desperately that nobody does. As evening falls, soldiers gather around small fires, sharing stale biscuits and watered-down coffee. The mood softens. Men joke about the pig's appetite, tell tales of past adventures, and, in a few cases, confess their nerves. One young recruit whispers to a friend, "I don't think we're going to fight at all." The friend shrugs. "Then what's the point?" You sit quietly, listening to the crackle of firewood and the occasional bark of a dog. Somewhere in the distance, a ship's whistle echoes, fading into the fog. The island, for all its military posturing, feels almost sleepy again, as though war, that great beast, might have wandered elsewhere in search of more convincing reasons. And yet, you can't shake the sense that something bigger is lurking beneath the surface, something that could flare at the slightest provocation. But for now, guns are cleaned, orders are barked, and everyone waits. Awkwardly, half-heartedly, and not entirely convinced that tomorrow will bring anything more than another round of rehearsed readiness. You wake the next morning to the soft hiss of rain tapping against wooden rooftops and the dull clang of mess tins being stacked for breakfast. The island smells of damp pine and seaweed, with the occasional sharp bite of gun oil from soldiers cleaning weapons that may never be fired. A low fog coils across the fields like a ghost reluctant to lift, and you trudge through puddles, boots sinking into the soft earth, the cold seeping through the soles like a quiet warning. As you pass between the camps, it's clear that everyone here is trying to look ready, though beneath that facade, nerves tremble like loose strings in the wind. Officers polish boots until they gleam, uniforms are pressed, and rifles are stacked with ceremonial precision. Men drill in neat lines, but their eyes wander toward the mist, toward the other camp, as if waiting for an order that may never come. This is where the theater of war reaches its peak. Both sides posture, bluffing strength with every practiced gesture. The British colonel instructs his men to march with confidence. Though his own jaw tightens at the slightest slip, the American captain orders a mock deployment, making sure the lines look impressive from afar, though the men themselves exchange uncertain glances when backs turn. You stop near a group of soldiers gathered around a crate of spare ammunition. One young private whispers, "Do you think we'll actually have to fire these?" Another shrugs. "Better to look like we will than admit we don't know how." They laugh quietly, a brittle sound that betrays their anxiety. The art of bluffing is everywhere. The British hoist a larger flag than necessary, letting it snap dramatically in the damp breeze. The Americans erect extra tents along their perimeter, giving the illusion of a larger force. Officers arrange cannons where visitors, surveyors, journalists, and neighboring settlers might see them first. It's all carefully choreographed to intimidate, to project power, to appear prepared without ever needing to fight. At the officer's tent, You overhear a hushed conversation between two men over maps spattered with rain. "We must hold our ground," one says. "If we back down, it'll be humiliating." The other sighs. "Better humiliation than bloodshed." They both glance toward the fog-draped hills, eyes shadowed by uncertainty. No one dares say that both sides hope the other will make the first move, and that deep down, everyone wants this farce to end without violence. Historians still argue whether this posturing was an accidental product of frontier insecurity or a deliberate tactic crafted by diplomats who understood that reputation mattered more than victory. Some scholars credit the calm heads of certain officers with preventing disaster, while others argue that the bluster nearly spiraled into armed conflict more than once, had tempers flared at the wrong time. Meanwhile, camp life hums with quiet absurdity. Soldiers compete to see who can march the straightest, who can polish a rifle until it reflects the dawn, and who can invent the most outlandish rumor about the enemy's weaknesses. A cook jokes, "We've got more butter than bullets. Maybe that's what we'll fight with." Laughter follows, quickly swallowed when a superior officer passes by. Even local settlers, watching from the sidelines, mimic the spectacle. Children line up, pretending to fire imaginary cannons, their shouts bouncing across the fields. Women collect fresh herbs and vegetables as if preparing for a siege, though most admit they wouldn't know how to aim a musket if they had to. Men boast of imagined battle exploits, only to glance nervously at the camp perimeter when their voices grow loud. You pause by a small ridge where a pair of soldiers from opposing sides exchange nods in silence. There's an unspoken understanding between them. Neither wants to be the first to ignite this farce into reality. One finally smiles wryly and says, "It's a war fought with manners, isn't it?" The other chuckles softly, "And with wet boots." As the day progresses, the tension relaxes slightly. Orders are given and followed with exaggerated efficiency, as if the routine itself is enough to maintain morale. Even the cannons, though primed and pointed, seem almost ornamental, their mouths staring blankly toward the other camp, waiting for someone to declare, "Fire!" You walk away from the ridge, a faint grin on your lips. It's strangely comforting to see this absurd theater unfold. Here, bravery is measured in polished buttons, not bloodshed. Pride is preserved through clever arrangement, not reckless violence. The island's actors perform their roles perfectly, ready to fight, but praying not to. And deep down, you know this dance of bluffing and bravado is a lesson few remember. Wars are often avoided not by superior firepower, but by restraint, humor, and the art of making the other side believe you're ready to fight, while secretly hoping they never test that resolve. You wander deeper into the heart of the island, where the settlers' lives carry on with a strangely cheerful defiance. The rain has eased to a fine mist, and patches of sunlight break through the clouds, lighting the fields in a soft golden haze. The scent of damp wood, tobacco smoke, and fresh bread wafts through the air, mixing with the salty tang from the nearby sea. Children's laughter echoes along the muddy paths, and you can't help but smile at the scene. An island on the edge of war behaving like a lively village fair. The absurdity of it all is infectious. People gossip openly, as if a shared joke has been passed from one campfire to another. At the well, women lean against its worn frame, whispering about the pig's appetite and the soldiers' awkward drills. "Did you see Private Hayes try to march?" one asks, stifling laughter. "He nearly tripped over his own musket." Another giggles. "Maybe the pig would have had better aim." At the marketplace, farmers trade stories of heroic confrontations with stubborn livestock, each tale growing more exaggerated than the last. "I once chased a pig through 3 fences and caught it by the tail," boasts a young man, puffing out his chest. An older neighbor snorts, "That pig was smarter than you." Their laughter ripples outward, and soon, others join in, swapping tales of spilled milk, wayward goats, and chickens that terrorized entire vegetable patches. Even flirtations become a kind of entertainment. A British settler's daughter teases an American farmhand, asking if he'd fight to the death for a patch of carrots. He grins sheepishly. Depends if you're watching. The nearby group of women bursts into giggles, and one whispers, "Maybe this whole war thing isn't so bad." You sit with a group of older settlers under a weathered awning, listening to their tales. One man shakes his head, smiling wryly. "We should have let the pig eat everything and moved on. But no, we had to show we could stand our ground." Another responds, "It's easier to fight when you're bored." They nod knowingly, and for a moment you feel how isolation breeds both resilience and ridiculousness. The soldiers, too, join in the levity when off duty. You watch a British lieutenant try to teach a group of American recruits how to march in formation. He demonstrates a stiff, exaggerated step, but his pupils mimic him in a way that's far too comical to ignore. Soon, the lesson descends into laughter and mock parades, complete with exaggerated salutes and ridiculous marching songs. Across the campfires, similar scenes play out. Soldiers compare makeshift trench designs, argue over whether dried apples are superior to salted pork, and swap recipes as if preparing for a long siege. One jokes, "If this war lasts another week, we'll all turn into pigs." Historians still argue how much boredom contributed to the spectacle. Some believe the settlers' humor was a coping mechanism, an unconscious rebellion against the creeping anxiety of conflict. Others insist it was deliberate, a way to mock the absurdity of military posturing and defuse tension before it spiraled out of control. Meanwhile, official reports back home describe the situation as tense but contained, leaving out the laughter-filled evenings and playful rivalries that defined daily life. Only those on the island truly grasp the paradox. Every glance, every jest, every playful competition hides a deeper fear of humiliation and isolation. You stroll past a group of children playing soldiers and pigs, an improvised game where one child pretends to be the stubborn pig and the others chase him with wooden sticks. Their shrieks of laughter rise like bubbles into the cool air, and you can't help but chuckle. Nearby, two women sit on barrels stitching patches onto uniforms, their hands steady despite the absurdity around them. "If the war doesn't happen," one says softly, "we'll have to invent something else to fuss about." As the sun sinks toward the horizon, the island glows in a mellow amber light. Smoke drifts lazily from cook fires. The smell of stew and cornbread fills the air, and the sound of fiddle tunes wafts from one camp to another. Soldiers practice drills with half-hearted precision. Children play games based on animals, and settlers tell tall tales, blurring fact and fancy until it's impossible to tell which is which. You realize that humor isn't just distraction. It's survival. It keeps spirits from cracking under pressure, gives voice to fears without inciting panic, and turns awkward stares into shared amusement. In this remote outpost, laughter serves as diplomacy, and play becomes a subtle form of negotiation. You pause on a hill, watching smoke curl into the evening sky, and you feel a quiet awe at the resilience of ordinary people. Here, on this damp, fog-laced island, life goes on, strange, ridiculous, tender, and brave, all in the shadow of what could have been a catastrophic war. The next morning, the fog has lifted just enough to reveal patches of blue sky streaked with pale sunlight. The island feels lighter, as though the nervous energy from the previous days has dispersed into laughter, chores, and routine. The earth is still soft and muddy underfoot, but children's footprints now crisscross the garden paths without fear, and the smell of wood smoke blends with damp grass and briny sea air. It's another ordinary day on the brink of disaster, and you, wandering among it, feel the strange sense that everyone is quietly enjoying the absurdity of it all. You pass the main thoroughfare where soldiers from both camps mingle during an unofficial truce. A group of British officers lean against crates, sipping coffee from tin cups, while American farmers trade apples and stories nearby. The barriers are still up, the camps still distinct, but the lines between them blur with every shared joke and exchanged recipe. Even the sentries, rifles at the ready, occasionally smile or nod when their counterparts glance over. A British sergeant, grizzled and missing 2 front teeth, beckons you over with a wink. "You new around here?" he asks. Before you can answer, he grins and adds, "Don't worry. We're more likely to shoot a pie at each other than a bullet." His laughter is contagious, and nearby soldiers chuckle, some shaking their heads at his audacity. Not far off, you spot an American private showing a British soldier how to carve a pumpkin. They sit cross-legged on the grass, using dull knives, their hands awkward but determined. "Careful," the American warns. "We don't want another casualty." The British soldier snorts, "Only if it's your pride." It's not that danger has vanished. It's still there, lurking like a cloud on the horizon. But humor has become armor, and camaraderie a bomb against isolation. People still joke about the pig's appetite, but the story has taken on new dimensions. Children reenact it with exaggerated snorts and dramatic falls. Settlers invent ballads celebrating the pig as a fearless warrior who charged the garden in the name of freedom. Even hardened officers laugh at the ballads, shaking their heads in disbelief. You sit with a group of locals listening to a traveling fiddler play a jaunty tune. The melody dances between campfires, carried by the wind, and even soldiers on distant posts tap their boots along with the rhythm. A few join in, their off-key singing dissolving into laughter before it begins. Historians still argue whether this shared humor was a genuine expression of goodwill or merely a pragmatic attempt to keep tempers from boiling over. Some believe the settlers' jokes masked deeper anxieties that could have exploded had discipline faltered. Others see it as a rare glimpse into frontier resilience, a reminder that communities forged in isolation must rely on humor, shared labor, and trust to survive. Later in the afternoon, you find yourself at the edge of the garden once devastated by the pig's intrusion. New vegetables sprout where old ones were eaten. The mud has dried to cracked ridges, and a few brave shoots of spinach stand tall, their leaves fresh and green. Children squat nearby, carefully tending small seedlings, whispering encouragement as though coaxing life itself to return. An older woman, bent with age but sharp-eyed, watches them and says softly, "We rebuild, that's all. Crops, fences, pride. It all gets patched up." She smiles, but it's not a forced smile. It's genuine, a quiet acknowledgement that hardship, absurdity, and laughter are woven into the fabric of frontier life. As the sun lowers, the island's sounds soften. The call of seabirds fades into the hush of crickets beginning their evening chorus. Smoke drifts from cabins, carrying the scent of stew, cornbread, and roasting roots. In the distance, you hear the low hum of conversations around campfires as settlers, soldiers, and travelers alike share meals and stories. You lean against a fence post, your hands resting in the worn grooves of the wood, and you feel the island's heartbeat. A strange rhythm pulsing between preparation and play, fear and resilience, pride and absurdity. It's a rhythm born of isolation, humor, and stubborn will. This isn't how wars are supposed to start, you think. It's how they are avoided. By baking pies instead of loading cannons. By sharing pumpkins instead of accusations. By laughing at a pig's appetite rather than sharpening knives against one another. And for now, on this rain-dampened island, that fragile peace holds. The morning mist rolls in again, soft and slow, as if the island itself is stretching after a long night of uneasy dreams. You walk along the muddy path between the camps, where the scent of damp pine needles and wood smoke mingles with something sweeter, freshly baked bread and steaming coffee. The air is crisp, and each breath fills your lungs with the sharp scent of salt from the sea and the earthiness of turned soil. Despite the tension still hanging like a curtain in the background, life hums with quiet determination. Today feels different, not because soldiers sharpen their weapons or maps are spread out with greater intensity, but because both camps have settled into a rhythm of coexistence. People nod to each other across the fields without fear. Children, once instructed to stay close to their homes, now run freely between plots of land and wooden posts, inventing games that blur national lines. One boy shouts, "I'm British," while another retorts, "I'm American," before both burst into laughter and chase each other down the lane. You stop by the well where a British and an American settler draw water side by side. Their buckets clank against the wooden pulley, and neither bothers to pretend surprise. "Careful," the British man says with a smirk, "or we'll both end up slipping in and making headlines." The American chuckles, "Let's save that for the newspapers. They'd never believe it." They exchange a glance filled with camaraderie, and perhaps a hint of shared disbelief that a war built on wounded pride could be avoided by simply acting like neighbors. At a nearby cook fire, soldiers from both sides share a pot of stew, each ladling servings with wooden spoons. The aroma of potatoes, onions, and beef, seasoned with whatever herbs they've managed to forage, fills the air with comfort. Someone jokes, "If this is a battle, it's one of stomachs, not rifles." Laughter bubbles through the group, and even the youngest recruits grin at the joke. You overhear snippets of conversation. "We should write a treaty about food. Maybe share recipes instead of firepower." Imagine the headlines. "Settlers declare truce over soup." It's tempting to laugh out loud, but you keep walking, soaking in the absurdity without interrupting it. This is how peace takes root, through mundane acts, shared humor, and the quiet realization that cooperation feels better than suspicion. Not that danger has entirely faded. Officers still meet to review patrol schedules, and guards still stand watch at night. Maps are still studied, and cannon wheels still bear the scars of rain. But the edge of panic has softened. Where yesterday's eyes darted anxiously toward the horizon, today's eyes search for jokes, stories, or simple tasks to keep hands busy. Historians still argue whether this atmosphere of humor and shared hardship prevented conflict or merely delayed the inevitable. Some claim that it was an intentional diplomatic tactic. Officers knew that mocking military readiness would force the other side to reconsider escalation. Others believe that exhaustion, boredom, and the isolation of frontier life simply wore down tempers until cooperation became the path of least resistance. You wander toward the heart of the camp where a small group of settlers gather around a battered piano. Its keys are uneven, some sticking when pressed, but it doesn't matter. Someone starts a jaunty tune, and others join in, clapping rhythms on barrels and stamping boots against the ground. A British officer's deep voice harmonizes with an American farmer's softer tone, weaving humor and melody into something unexpectedly touching. A young girl with fiery red hair spins around laughing, her pigtails flying like flags. An older man, his beard white as sea foam, taps along with a grin that crinkles his eyes. The melody floats into the air like a promise, fragile, imperfect, but sincere. You pause, leaning against a wooden post, and feel the warmth rising from the circle of people gathered around the music. For a moment, the looming specter of war seems absurd, almost laughable. What danger could survive laughter this genuine? And yet, you know this piece is delicate. It rests on a web of shared routines, jokes, and small acts of kindness, threads that, if snapped by pride or fear, could unravel at any moment. Still, watching this island of awkward settlers, playful soldiers, and fearless children, you feel a quiet gratitude. For here, at least for today, humanity chooses humor over hostility, connection over conflict, and neighbors over enemies. It's a lesson not easily learned, and one that, despite its absurd beginning, just might save the day. You wake to the soft cry of gulls and the dull percussion of boots trudging through mud. The island's edges are blurred by morning fog, but already the smell of damp earth and smoke from breakfast fires greets you. Somewhere nearby, the sharp scent of coffee mingles with fried pork, and even that familiar smell feels ironic today. After all, it was a pig that nearly ignited a war. As you wander toward the camp's edge, you notice that conversations have shifted. Jokes about the pig's appetite still abound, but now they're layered with deeper reflections. Men sit around fires sharing stories not just of livestock, but of family, loss, and dreams left behind. Women gather herbs together, exchanging remedies for homesickness or seasickness. Children invent elaborate games based on border disputes, arguing rules with theatrical intensity before dissolving into laughter. It's hard not to be charmed by this resilience. The island's inhabitants seem to be rewriting the narrative, as if they collectively decided that tension would only serve to sap their strength. The pig's death has become a shared story, not one of blame, but of how close they came to spiraling into needless conflict. You pause near a group of soldiers gathered around a map stretched across a crate. The map is smudged by fingerprints and damp edges curling inward, but the men are intent on marking patrol routes and watch posts. Their captain, a tall man with graying temples, strokes his chin thoughtfully and mutters, "We're prepared, at least enough to convince ourselves we are." One of the younger soldiers snorts. "Prepared to do what?" "To stand firm," the captain replies. "That's what men like us are for." A British officer, leaning nearby, adds dryly, "And to look impressive while doing so." Laughter breaks the tension, but it doesn't erase the truth beneath it. Preparedness here is as much about maintaining appearances as it is about readiness. Neither side truly expects war, but neither wants to admit it openly. Historians still debate whether this performative posture was a strategy born of diplomatic necessity or simply the result of frontier anxiety. Some argue that pride required the illusion of strength, while others believe humor and routine were survival mechanisms deployed instinctively by people and used to large-scale conflict. Later in the afternoon, you wander toward the shoreline where British and American supply ships bob gently against the docks. Crews, sleeves rolled up, unload barrels of flour, sacks of salt pork, and crates of canned goods. The rhythm of unloading is oddly soothing, repetitive and methodical, almost meditative in its insistence on order amid uncertainty. A British sailor, wiping sweat from his brow, jokes with an American dockworker. "Careful with that barrel," he grins. "It's our last defense against starvation, and your best hope for dinner." The dockworker chuckles. "If it keeps us from fighting, I'll guard it with my life." Nearby, you spot another group comparing tools, debating the merits of different rifles, and trading hunting tips as if preparing for a cooperative expedition rather than a battlefield. Even the soldiers' mess tents, with their crooked poles and patched canvas, feel more like communal kitchens than military posts. As you sit on a rock overlooking the dock, you hear the distant calls of seabirds circling over tide pools, the soft lap of water against hulls, and the occasional bark of a sea lion hauling itself onto a rock shelf. It's a soundscape far removed from battlefields you've read about in history books. Here, nature continues its quiet routines while humans humbly rearrange their own. At one point, you strike up a conversation with a middle-aged settler named Amos, his face lined with sun and wind. He shrugs when you ask how he feels about the standoff. "We all talk about fighting," he says, "but it's hard to believe anyone really wants it. We're too tired. We've come this far to scratch each other over a pig's mischief." You smile. "And yet you prepare." He nods. "Pride's a stubborn thing." His words linger as you rise and walk back toward camp. Pride, humor, and fatigue seem to entwine like strands of rope, holding the island together. It's a delicate balance, but one that's proving surprisingly resilient. The evening light spills across the water, gilding the ships in soft gold. Children play near the docks, soldiers exchange jokes over steaming bowls of stew, and settlers settle in for another night of shared meals and quiet storytelling. War feels distant, absurd even, as if the island's people, by leaning into camaraderie and laughter, have gently rewired the course of history. You settle by the fire, the warmth radiating against the cool sea breeze, and realize that peace isn't always forged by grand gestures or heroic speeches. Sometimes it's built from shared meals, playful banter, and the willingness to laugh at yourself before you lash out at your neighbor. The morning arrives with a hush, as if the island itself is listening. A soft wind carries the scent of wet grass, with smoke and salt air. The clouds hang low, their edges tinged with rose and amber as the sun rises reluctantly above the treetops. You breathe deeply, feeling the chill bite at your cheeks before fading beneath the warmth of breakfast fires and the clatter of mess tins. It's another day balanced between preparation and play, between pride and absurdity. You follow the path to the heart of the camps where a group of officers meet under a makeshift awning. Maps are spread across a wooden crate, their corners weighted by stones and canteens. The men lean over them with furrowed brows, though the tension in their posture seems forced, as if they're performing seriousness more than pursuing it. The British officer clears his throat and points at the coastline. "This ridge here must be guarded," he says. An American captain rubs his chin thoughtfully. "Agreed. If we show we've secured it, they'll think twice about pushing." A younger officer pipes up. "Do they even care if we've secured it?" There's a beat of silence, then nervous chuckles ripple through the group. You crouch nearby, unnoticed, listening as the men debate patrol routes that few believe will ever be crossed. One argues for building wooden barricades. Another shrugs. "It's more for appearances than defense." The senior officer, his lips pressed tight, finally says, "Still, appearances matter." It's a moment both earnest and ironic. Here, military strategy is less about anticipating battle and more about reassuring allies and intimidating rivals. Pride, it seems, demands action even when action is unnecessary. Later, you wander toward the communal kitchen where settlers from both camps mingle freely. The aroma of simmering stews, roasting roots, and baking bread fills the air. Large kettles bubble over open fires, sending fragrant steam spiraling upward. Women stir pots with wooden spoons, swapping recipes and sharing tips as if preparing for a harvest festival rather than a standoff. A British woman laughs as she explains how she once chased a pig off her porch with nothing but a broomstick. "It's either that or share it with the neighbors," she jokes, earning a round of hearty laughter from the surrounding crowd. An American settler grins and replies, "Better a broom than a bullet." The humor is warm and contagious, yet it never dismisses the uncertainty just beneath the surface. You overhear whispered debates about insurance claims, compensation, and the fragile web of alliances that could unravel if tempers flare. Even in laughter, worry lingers, but it's held at bay by shared effort and empathy. Historians still argue whether these gatherings were simply morale boosters or deliberate peace-building exercises disguised as kitchen banter. Some claim that such interactions humanized both sides, breaking down barriers and fostering empathy that official proclamations could never achieve. Others suggest that these routines only papered over the island's fragile stability, offering comfort without solving underlying tensions. You wander further and come upon a group of children seated in a circle, listening wide-eyed to an old storyteller. He weaves a tale about a fearless pig who challenged kings and generals alike, rooting through gardens with the bravery of a hero. The children gasp at every turn of the plot, laughing when the pig outwits soldiers and cheering when the stubborn animal claims victory with a triumphant squeal. The storyteller's eyes twinkle with mischief as he throws in sly asides. Of course, historians still argue whether he planned it all or just got lucky. Nearby, a young boy pipes up, "But if he won, why didn't they let him be king?" The storyteller smiles. "Ah, but that's a question for another night." You watch the children's faces, lit by both firelight and imagination, and you realize how easily history, fact, and myth intertwine. In their minds, the pig has become more than livestock. It's a legend, a symbol of defiance and humor in the face of uncertainty. As dusk approaches, the island's sounds soften. Fireflies begin to blink in the shrubs, and crickets start their steady rhythm. The smell of stew thickens the air, mingling with the cool dampness rising from the soil. Soldiers gather at mess tents, sharing stories and grins. Settlers settle near the fires, passing bowls and recipes. Even the guards at the perimeter relax their posture, their shoulders less rigid, their eyes less sharp. You sit by the fire, the warmth pressing against your skin as you listen to laughter ripple through the camp. In the distance, you catch sight of officers still poring over maps, but their faces are lighter, their gestures less severe. Pride remains, but it no longer governs every movement. Here, on this small stretch of earth held between fog and sea, you feel how easily fear could have spiraled into catastrophe, and how, instead, humor, routine, and shared humanity have kept it at bay. The island doesn't feel like a powder keg ready to explode. It feels like a living community, bruised but unbroken, poised between absurdity and grace, leaning into laughter as if that alone might hold the world together. The morning sun filters through thin clouds, casting a soft, pearly glow over the island. Dew clings to blades of grass like tiny beads of glass, and the air carries the mingled scent of sea salt, damp wood, and smoke from breakfast fires. You breathe deeply, savoring the quiet hush that blankets the camp before the day's chatter and clatter resume. It's one of those mornings where even the gulls call softly, as if conspiring not to disturb the fragile calm that settled over the island. You wander toward the sentry posts along the outer ridge. Though guards stand watch, their rifles slung more casually over shoulders than yesterday. Some stare into the distance with dreamy eyes, lost in thought. Others joke with one another in low tones, careful not to let commanders overhear. The world, it seems, has slowed war's sharp edge dulled by shared routine, by a community growing too comfortable with peace. At the far post, 2 sentries, one British, one American, sit side by side, cleaning their weapons together. The British soldier, with a neatly trimmed beard, holds up his musket and sighs. "If I didn't know better," he says, "I'd think this was just a long camping trip." The American grins. "At least we'd have food." They both laugh quietly, scrubbing stubborn patches of rust from barrels with bits of cloth. You crouch nearby, listening without intruding. Their banter is gentle, as though they're testing how far they can joke without inviting trouble. A few feet away, a group of officers review reports, but even their serious expressions carry the softness of men trying not to overthink the situation. You wander downhill toward the farms. Here, life hums with purpose. Chickens scratch in the soft earth, pigs wallow in puddles, and families gather baskets filled with root vegetables, fresh greens, and foraged herbs. The smell of wet soil and growing things rises in waves, grounding you in the ordinary labor of survival. Children dart between plots of crops, their laughter rising like bubbles. A group of girls invents a game where they pretend to be pig chasers, weaving between tomato plants and cabbage heads as if on a daring expedition. Boys gather twigs and branches to build miniature forts, arguing over which side would win if a real battle broke out. At one corner of the farm, a farmer named Eli stands overseeing a team of workers patching a fence with fresh planks. His hands are gnarled with age, but his movements are steady and practiced. "We rebuild what's been broken," he says softly to a younger man nearby. "That's how we stay standing." His eyes, clouded with wisdom and worry, meet yours briefly before returning to his work. You pause and help lift a basket of turnips onto a cart. The farmer nods with quiet thanks but says nothing more. The work itself seems to speak for him. The way bodies lean into labor, the rhythm of hands passing tools and produce, the way conversation falls into gentle murmurs rather than heated debate. Historians still argue whether these daily tasks were conscious attempts to maintain morale or simple habits of frontier life adapted to uncertain circumstances. Some believe that tending crops, repairing fences, and sharing recipes provided more than sustenance. They built trust, softened tempers, and reminded everyone that survival depended on cooperation rather than competition. Others see them as distractions, keeping minds occupied so they wouldn't dwell on fear. You follow a narrow path toward a small grove where women gather herbs. The air is thick with the peppery scent of wild mint, the grassy sharpness of plantain leaves, and the faint bitterness of dried roots. They sit in a circle, their fingers deftly stripping leaves, snipping stems, and bundling plants into neat bunches. Their conversation flutters from remedies for fever to how best to patch worn boots to laughing recollections of the pig's audacious appetite. One of the women, her hair streaked with silver, looks up at you and smiles. "It's strange, isn't it?" she says. "How one pig's greed nearly toppled a world." Another snorts. "Worlds crumble over less." They laugh, but there's wisdom behind the humor. A shared understanding that crisis, no matter how absurd, reveals the fault lines beneath polite civility. You sit briefly with them, inhaling the scent of crushed herbs and listening to their quiet jokes. The conversation ebbs and flows, never rushed, always gentle, as if they've chosen, consciously or not, to wrap their days in calmness rather than fear. By afternoon, the camp's routines have fully settled. Children nap beneath the shade of wagons. Soldiers play cards near cookfires. Officers exchange letters with mainland families, their faces softening at the sound of distant news. Even the occasional dispute over supplies, schedules, or fence repairs is handled with humor and negotiation rather than command and rebuke. You realize how easy it would have been for this island to unravel in anger, pride, and suspicion. But instead, you witness something rarer. A community that, faced with potential catastrophe, chose gentleness, routine, and laughter as its shields. As the day winds down, you sit by a small fire at the edge of the camp, the warmth curling around your fingers as the sea breeze cools your face. Nearby, children chase fireflies, their giggles mingling with the soft crackle of flames. Soldiers joke quietly about who could outrun a pig if it returned, their voices low and relaxed. Settlers tend gardens and sort tools without urgency. You lean back, gazing at the sky turning lavender with dusk, and feel a deep, unspoken gratitude. In a world quick to ignite over pride and grievance, here you've watched people quietly choose another way. For now, it's enough. The next morning greets you with a soft golden light spilling through a pale blue sky. The air is crisp, with that faint tang of salt carried in from the sea and the sweet scent of damp earth still rising from the night's mist. You inhale deeply, the chill brushing your cheeks and filling your lungs, and it feels as though the island itself is stretching, preparing to face another day. Not with tension, but with calm purpose. You wander toward the camp's main square, where chatter and laughter ripple like a gentle stream. Today, there's a sense of ease in the way people move, as if they trust that tomorrow's uncertainties can wait. Farmers wheel carts laden with fresh produce toward communal tables. Soldiers, boots muddy from patrol paths, share jokes while patching gear. Children swarm around barrels and crates, inventing new games with astonishing speed, their imagination as boundless as the sea beyond the ridge. At the center of it all stands a makeshift platform built from crates and planks, draped in cloth. A group of settlers, both British and American, gather around it, whispering excitedly. Someone hands you a mug of steaming cider, and the scent of cinnamon and cloves instantly warms you from within. The platform, it turns out, is for a storytelling evening. After sunset, a smiling woman explains, "We'll gather and share tales. Funny ones, heroic ones, even ones about pigs, if you dare." The idea spreads quickly. Settlers begin planning their entries, rehearsing jokes and dramatic gestures in hushed tones. Children practice pig snorts, and men rehearse exaggerated tales of hunting mishaps. Even the officers, stoic at first, exchange knowing glances, as if amused by the thought of sharing stories instead of drilling troops. You overhear two officers from opposite sides exchanging pleasantries. "Perhaps this will teach us something about diplomacy," one says dryly, "or how to laugh at ourselves before we're forced to cry." The other replies with a grin. The mood is contagious. Work continues, but every conversation seems lighter, every interaction more playful. You pass a group of settlers weaving garlands of wildflowers to decorate the platform, their fingers quick and precise. The soft fragrance of daisies and queen anne's lace mixes with the smell of fresh hay and earth, giving the space an almost festive feel. As the afternoon deepens, you stroll through the gardens once again. Here, life hums with ordinary tasks, yet every action is infused with an almost ritualistic calm. A young girl kneels beside a row of spinach leaves, carefully removing damaged leaves before they rot. A boy tightens a loose fence post with solemn concentration, as if repairing it might somehow help hold the piece together. Nearby, an elderly settler tells another, "We've seen harder times, I reckon, but none quite this peculiar. A war that never was, a pig that could have started it. It's enough to make a man laugh at the world." The other chuckles softly. "Laughing's better than worrying, friend." Historians still debate whether these moments of storytelling and shared tasks represented genuine peace-building or merely a way to pass time while waiting for orders that never came. Some suggest that humor helped fortify bonds that military strategy alone couldn't, while others argue it masked a simmering anxiety that could easily be reignited. Regardless, you sense that, for now, it's working. As the sun begins its slow descent toward the horizon, long shadows stretch across the camp. Fires are kindled in preparation for the evening's entertainment. The scent of roasting roots, spiced cider, and fresh bread thickens the air, weaving together with the cooler sea breeze into a comforting embrace. You sit with a group of settlers near the platform, sharing stories of childhood pranks and harvest mishaps. Laughter erupts easily, but it's never cruel. Jokes are gentle, teasing rather than mocking. The spirit of the gathering feels inclusive, even hopeful, as if everyone silently agrees that this moment of connection is a gift worth protecting. Children gather on blankets, eyes wide with anticipation. Soldiers lounge nearby, their muskets leaning against posts, forgotten for a while. Even the officers, who moments ago argued over patrol schedules, now sit among the crowd, listening as neighbors recount tales of stubborn mules, flooded barns, and wayward livestock that once terrorized entire fields. As dusk deepens into twilight, fireflies blink into view, winking like tiny lanterns among the shrubs. The island's hush grows softer still, as though nature itself is holding its breath, savoring the peace. You lean back against a wooden post, cider warming your hands, and take it all in. The island's heartbeat is steady, not frantic. The laughter, the shared food, the stories. It's all working like threads woven into a fabric strong enough, for now, to hold a community together. In this moment, you realize that peace isn't built by grand speeches or endless negotiations. It's built from simple acts. Sharing a cup of cider, telling a funny story, repairing a fence, listening with kindness. And here, on this quiet island, surrounded by neighbors who laugh instead of lash out, you feel that peace is not just possible. It's already here. The morning rises soft and silver, with thin clouds stretched like gauze across a pale sky. The air smells of sea salt and wet pine bark, and each breath feels cool and fresh, as if the island is rinsed clean of worry. You wake slowly, as though reluctant to disturb the fragile calm that has settled into every corner of the camp. Even the gulls cry more softly, circling lazily above the shoreline as if mindful of the quietness below. You wander toward the communal square where the platform stands ready, draped in wildflowers and trimmed with strips of cloth woven from old uniforms and table linens. Children's footprints mark the dust around it, proof of their secret rehearsals in the shadows. Nearby, women hang lanterns that sway gently in the morning breeze, their soft light catching droplets of dew like scattered stars. Settlers bustle about with a purposeful calm, arranging blankets and benches, stirring giant pots of stew, and unpacking bundles of herbs and preserves to share. The smells are inviting: roasted root vegetables, warm bread, fragrant spices, and somehow even more comforting today than usual, as if preparing for the evening's stories requires an extra dose of care. You sit with a group of settlers near a fire, sipping cider and listening to their quiet conversations. One man laughs as he recounts how his brother once mistook a skunk for a wild pig and spent an entire afternoon chasing it through the cornfields. Another, a woman with a sharp wit, tells of a barn cat who learned to open latches and raid the pantry, becoming an unlikely tyrant in her household. Everyone listens with smiles, nods, and hearty chuckles. Even the officers, who are usually stiff and formal, are more relaxed today. They share tea with settlers, exchange lighthearted remarks, and join in preparing the space for storytelling. A British officer, brushing hay from his coat, grins at an American farmer and says, "If tales of pigs can keep men from war, I say we should build statues of them instead of cannons." The farmer snorts in response. "A fine monument, I'd wager." As you move through the camp, you overhear the occasional whispered debate about whether this easygoing atmosphere is sustainable. One settler confides, "It's a good thing for now, but pride's a sly thing. It'll find a way back in." Another shakes his head. "Maybe, but we've done more for peace in a week of laughter than in months of arguing." Historians still debate whether these lighthearted gatherings truly defused tensions or simply postponed the inevitable clash. Some argue that humor and routine patched the community together, allowing people to see each other's humanity before national rivalries hardened into enmity. Others warn that the laughter masked a deeper insecurity that, if pried apart, would have reignited conflict in an instant. As the afternoon stretches, you stroll toward the shoreline. The sea laps gently at the rocks, its rhythmic hush blending with distant chatter and the occasional burst of laughter. Children play in the sand, building forts and castles with impressive determination, while older kids stage mock battles using sticks and leaves for swords. There's an earnestness to their games, but also an undercurrent of playfulness, as if they're learning to laugh at their own dramatics before they ever face real hardship. A group of settlers kneels nearby, weaving flower crowns for the evening's gathering. The scent of wild blossoms, daisies, clover, and violet, fills the air, sweet and calming. One young woman hums a tune as she works, her fingers deftly threading stems with practiced ease. Another smiles and teases. You hum like you're already halfway through your story. As you sit with them, a sense of belonging envelopes you. These are ordinary people, living in uncertain times, who've chosen to turn daily life into something lighter, softer, and more compassionate. Their laughter isn't careless. It's deliberate, a quiet rebellion against the fear and pride that so often pull communities apart. By late afternoon, preparations are complete. The lanterns are ready, blankets spread neatly in circles, and pots of stew simmer gently over low fires. The square hums with expectation, not dread. Settlers and soldiers gather side by side, their faces relaxed and eager. You sit on a wooden bench near the platform, watching children chase fireflies as dusk gathers. The scent of cider and roasting vegetables curls around you, mingling with the cool sea breeze. Above, the sky deepens from lavender to indigo, and one by one the lanterns are lit, their soft glow casting a golden halo around the gathering. This evening, it seems, will not be one of tense speeches and rigid commands. It will be one of laughter, storytelling, and shared humanity. A quiet celebration of connection rather than conquest. You smile, cradling your mug, and feel that the island's fragile peace has never felt stronger. Twilight settles over the island like a soft shawl, wrapping the camps in shades of purple and indigo. The air smells of wood smoke curling from cook fires, mingled with the sweet, warm scent of spiced cider and roasting vegetables. Crickets chirp in steady rhythm, and somewhere beyond the trees, the sea sighs against the shore in slow, patient waves. You sit near the heart of the camp as lanterns flicker to life, their soft glow washing over faces eager with anticipation. The platform draped in flowers stands ready, and blankets form cozy circles where settlers, soldiers, and children gather, as if preparing for a festival rather than the aftermath of a near conflict. Laughter bubbles everywhere. Someone nudges a friend and whispers a joke about pig-chasing tactics. Children collapse into fits of giggles at the prospect of reenacting the infamous animal's exploits. Even the officers, who once scowled over patrol schedules, now chuckle at playful reenactments of stiff drills gone awry. The atmosphere is buoyant but not careless. It's a calm built from trust and a shared understanding that peace, once chosen, must be nurtured with humor and heart. You sip from your mug, the warmth of the cider spreading through your chest as you watch faces lit from within by lantern light. A storyteller takes the stage, clearing his throat with theatrical flourish, and begins weaving tales of daring livestock, heroic barn cats, and a particularly mischievous pig whose antics nearly brought two nations to the brink of disaster. Children gasp at each twist, then roar with laughter when the pig outwits generals and sneaks past guards with comic precision. The adults laugh too, their faces softening as the absurdity of it all sinks in. Even those who once bristled at the idea of humor now lean forward, eager for more. Historians still argue why this evening became legendary. Some say the settlers and soldiers learned that human connection, shared laughter, food, and stories, could defuse pride and prevent escalation more effectively than threats or posturing. Others believe it was a temporary reprieve, a fragile bubble that could have burst under pressure. Regardless of interpretation, you know this much for certain. These stories, told in the golden hour before nightfall, stitched people together in ways treaties never could. As the storyteller's tale winds to a close, the crowd erupts in applause, cheers, and laughter that feels like a soft tide washing over everyone. A child stands and mimics the pig's famous snort, sending the audience into hysterics. An elderly settler wipes tears from his eyes, half from laughter and half from emotion. The officers exchange glances, a knowing smile passing between them, as if silently acknowledging that tonight, they've all chosen humanity over hostility. You feel a gentle calm seep into your bones. The camp is no longer a tinderbox waiting for a spark. It's a woven community held together by everyday acts of kindness, shared stories, and laughter that disarms pride before it can harden into anger. Above you, the stars begin to twinkle, faint and scattered at first, then growing brighter as the night deepens. The fire crackles and soft conversations hum like a lullaby. Children curl up beside their parents, eyes heavy with sleep but smiles lingering. Settlers and soldiers alike sit quietly, their faces turned toward the stage, listening to the storyteller's closing words with peaceful attention. You stretch your legs, tuck your hands around your warm mug, and breathe in the night air one last time before letting it out in a contented sigh. In this moment, the absurdity of a war nearly fought over a pig feels distant, almost laughable. What remains is connection, compassion, and the quiet strength that comes from choosing to care for one another, even when pride urges you otherwise. You lean back against the wooden bench, eyes half closed, and let the soft glow of the lanterns, the scent of warm cider, and the gentle hum of conversation lull you. Peace isn't a grand victory. It's built in these small, everyday moments, held together by laughter, shared food, and a community that chooses kindness over conflict. For now, it's enough.